What if December 7th, 1941, was just an ordinary Sunday? What if Pearl Harbor never pulled America into the deadliest war in human history, and the United States simply stayed out? Here's what most people don't realize. Right up until Pearl Harbor, most Americans wanted nothing to do with this war. The America First Committee had over 800,000 members. Congress had passed neutrality acts specifically to keep the U.S. out. Roosevelt was sending aid to Britain through Lend-Lease, but full military entry was deeply unpopular. So let's ask, what if that one attack never happened and America's isolation held? Picture Britain in 1942, still standing after winning the Battle of Britain, but now facing years more of war without American troops, without American factories, without the industrial flood that eventually tipped the balance. On the Eastern Front, the Soviet Union was already doing the overwhelming majority of the fighting against Germany. Historians estimate roughly 80% of German military casualties came from the Eastern Front. Without a Western Front ever opening, no D-Day, no Normandy, the Soviet Red Army might not stop at Berlin. It might just keep going, all the way to the Atlantic coast. A Europe liberated entirely by Stalin, not shared with the rest, could look almost unrecognizable by 1946. Now, the Pacific. Without Pearl Harbor as the trigger, Japan's expansion across Asia likely continues longer, uncontested by American naval power. And here's the part that changes everything. The Manhattan Project was overwhelmingly an American undertaking, fueled by wartime mobilization on a scale no other nation could match. Without full American entry into the war, that project slows dramatically, maybe by years. Which raises an uncomfortable question historians still debate. If the US doesn't build the bomb first, does Nazi Germany's own nuclear program, however far behind it actually was, get the time it needs to catch up instead? Follow this all the way to 1950. No Marshall Plan rebuilding Western Europe because there's no American victory to rebuild from. No NATO in its historical form. A Soviet Union that potentially controls not just Eastern Europe, but the entire continent, standing face to face with a wartime, untested America across the Atlantic instead of across a divided Germany. The entire architecture of the Cold War, the one we actually got, might not just look different. It might not exist at all, replaced by something far more dangerous. One superpower with no rival left standing on an entire continent. But here's the twist historians point to again and again. America didn't actually declare war on Germany because of Pearl Harbor. Japan attacked the US. But Germany and Japan weren't even bound by a mutual defense treaty that required it. Hitler declared war on the United States first on December 11th, 1941, completely voluntarily, against the advice of his own military. If Hitler simply hadn't done that, FDR may have struggled for months to convince a divided Congress to fight in Europe at all. A war against only Japan, with Europe left entirely alone, was a very real possibility, decided by one man's decision 4 days after Pearl Harbor. One man's decision decided the shape of the modern world. If that's the kind of history that stays with you, subscribe. Lost Timelines finds a new one every day.